Welcome to PandaAudioBooks, the perfect place for a huge collection of fantasy novels. If you enjoy my content and want to support my work, a small contribution via PayPal is greatly appreciated. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell to stay updated with our latest audiobook chapters. Chapter 1021, Spirit Fuse. The wooden ruler floating above the silver box was covered in a barrier of green light. Then in a flash, the light completely faded away. Strangely enough, there was a man standing motionlessly over 30 meters away. He wore blue robes, a red headscarf, and had green lines shining from his face. It was the illustrious Grand Elder of the sacred poison sect, Xianxia. However, his eyes were closed and expression stiff. Blood leaked from his every orifice. Were it not for the faint movements of his chest, he would have been mistaken for dead. As for his other sect members, they were nowhere in sight. However, the sounds of a faint explosion could be heard in the distance, as if someone was trapped by a restriction. In the other space, the purple light that shone from the black wolf head's eyes had disappeared, and a woman's sweet voice rang out, the very same one that had spoken on the day Xianxia was trapped, but this time with a hint of iciness and much more crude. "Bloodflame, it was you. I believed you to have already returned. I didn't expect you to remain in this world." The elder devil respectfully replied, "I pay my respects, Senior. I had taken action too late in the past and had nearly been destroyed. Were it not for my understanding of the passageway between the holy and the mortal realm, and their intent to draw out my soul and interrogate me, I wouldn't have lived until now." The wolf head remained indifferent when it heard this and nodded. "Oh, your luck is quite good then. The passage through that spirit ether garden spatial tear we used had already been destroyed by the time we wished to return, and we had no way back." The large-headed eccentric calmly listened from the side, inwardly surprised at the lack of any devilish characteristics from the feminine voice. This is the elder devil that nearly exterminated the ancient cultivators in the past. The head then lowered to the black chains binding it and said, "Since you've come here, you should have a plan. But I must first warn you that rescuing me will not be so trivial. Your cultivation will not be enough to destroy even the heavenly star chains binding me. It is a treasure passed down from the spirit realm specifically meant to deal with our kind. Be at ease, sacred ancestor. I've made full preparations before coming. Not only will fellow Daoist be assisting us, but I've gathered many devilish artifacts to assist." The black wolf shook its head. "You might be able to break through the chains, but even so, I cannot have you immediately take action." "Why is that?" The elder devil betrayed surprise from his face, eyes brimming with purple and red light. The eccentric was also surprised. The head sighed, "It's quite simple. The star chains aren't the most powerful restriction here. Take a look at where you're standing." "Where are standing?" The elder devil and the eccentric bewilderedly turned their attention to their feet and only saw the black teleportation formation and nothing else. The head turned to look at its still asleep silver wolf head with a grave expression. "Do you believe I can leave this place as I wish? The divine spirit treasure on the 8th floor will immediately activate should I make an attempt. And if you perform any exceeding actions, the treasure will immediately teleport you away, preventing you from easily coming back. In addition, the main reason I was trapped here in the first place was because of this troublesome silver moon wolf body." They both looked at the slumbering silver wolf head and suddenly came to a faint realization. The elder devil hesitantly asked, "In the past, wasn't that wolf's primal soul consumed by the sacred ancestor? Could it be that something happened?" The black wolf head annoyedly snorted, "When I possessed this body, there were 2 primal souls. I gravely injured one and it escaped, leading me to believe that I would be unbothered. As for the other, it used a secret technique to hide someplace in the body. When I was in the crucial point of the battle against the 3 masters of Kunwu, it suddenly counterattacked and I was defeated, leading me to become sealed." 2 primal souls? A single body with 2 souls? The eccentric couldn't help but cry out in shock. "You humans sure know a lot. This body possessed 2 entirely independent souls. Originally, there was only one, but when the second made an appearance, the first soul came and fought against me for control over the body. The wolf's cultivation art was also truly strange. I possessed this body for such a long time and never noticed anything amiss, she muttered with a puzzled tone. Could it be that the second wolf's soul still exists? Of course. When the humans captured me, I came to realize that this silver moon wolf was actually the concubine of one of the spirit realm's demon monarchs, the divine wolf celestial Kuei. She was also one of the few demons to descend into the mortal realm in their true body. I was only able to easily take control because it was still weak from its descent into the moral realm. Had the wolf been at the peak of its cultivation, a soul fragment like me wouldn't have been close to successful, and the existence of its two souls had left me completely off guard. But at the time, I had already possessed the body for a few years and corrupted most of it. The humans were no longer able to expel me and didn't dare to rashly exterminate me along with the body. As a result, they could only seal me inside the devil-suppressing pagoda. The elder devil managed to retain most of his calm, but the eccentric was left flabbergasted. From that, you mean to say that the second wolf soul still exists in that body? The elder devil bitterly laughed and stared at the silver wolf head. The head sweetly chuckled. It is no longer there, but in a moment, she should be coming back. You were quite lucky that I was in control when you woke me up. Sacred ancestor, what do you mean? The elder devil felt his heart tremble. It is quite simple. At the time, the ancient cultivators used the Black Wind flag to seal me in this spiritless land and intentionally extracted the second wolf soul. Then, sparing no effort, they constructed a palace hall brimming with spiritual chi for her. As a result, the soul would attempt to fight me over control of this body every so often. When she exhausts herself, she would return and recover her strength. Because I am sealed here and can only rely on the devilish chi within my body to resist her, I found myself at a great disadvantage. In order to retain control, I had no choice but to use the greater spirit fuse arts. What? The spirit fuse arts? You're already... The elder devil's four eyes twisted in shock, momentarily forgetting to speak with a respectful tone. That's right, I fused souls with her to form an entirely new one. Her soul served as the base and I was second. But at the start, the newly fused soul was unstable, and when they saw this new soul, they were unable to recognize what had happened. Because they couldn't verify her identity, they also couldn't release the seal. Those cultivators didn't dare to take action due to her status and rashly sealed the entire mountain. As a result, our souls ended up strangely sealed together. Now that over 10,000 years have passed, the fusion of our souls stabilized into a fine result. But over the past few days, the other half stealthily submerged a deity transformation stage cultivator into phantasmic air, causing our soul to weaken and divide once more. However, I reckon that this will be the last time the split will occur. After it is replenished with spiritual chi from the palace on the other side, our souls will become one. As the black wolf head spoke, she maintained a calm tone. The other two, however, were at a loss for words. The elder devil was mute for a long while before letting out a bitter laugh. Great sacred ancestor, are you the new soul of a demon, or are you still a member of our holy race? The wolf head indifferently replied, What do you mean? The elder devil could only remain silent. After a moment of thought, the eccentric said, Since you've given us such a detailed explanation, you should have a method to stop your counterpart. Please don't hesitate to speak. Purple light flashed from the wolf's eyes and said, Oh, I still haven't asked why a human like you is assisting Bloodflame. I see that you've used up most of your lifespan and death is soon approaching. Could it be you wish for me to infuse you with devilish chi? At that moment, a sinister expression appeared on the eccentric's face. Since you've seen through me, I won't conceal this any longer. I would rather tread the devil Tao for an eternity than perish from age and have my 1,000 years of bitter cultivation and bloody battles be for naught. Could it be you would have me subject myself to the cycle of life? Chapter 1022, Reappearance of Essence Light. The black wolf had glanced at the eccentric. Your words are quite forthcoming and bold. Since you have already resolved yourself, if you assist in my escape, I will infuse devilish chi into your body. I'll get the ugly talk out of the way. you will only have a 50% chance of success with your aptitude. But even then, the infusion of devilish chi should extend your lifespan greatly, as our race's longevity is far superior to a mere human's. This will grant you another opportunity to ascend to deity transformation stage. The large-headed eccentric let out a wild roar of laughter. Only 50%? I'd still take the risk if it was only a tenth. Go ahead and tell me what it will take to free you. I will get straight to the point. At my current stage of the spirit fuse, I will be unable to resist the rejoining of our souls once the other soul re-enters my body. The only way to stop this is to exterminate it. It is located in a grand execution formation that the 3 Kunwu masters had personally placed down, consisting of 81 devil executing sabers. If devilish chi approaches, the blades will create a formation of overwhelming power. Blood flame will not be able to break through. Although your cultivation art isn't righteous or Buddhist, it isn't devilish either. We must leave the extermination of the wolf soul over to you. So long as you fulfill this task, the matter of your devil infusion will be taken care of. The head's voice completely changed and was now filled with an enticing tone, causing the eccentric's expression to waver. A moment later, he grit his teeth, giving up any intention of negotiation, and asked, "Where is it located?" Fellow Daoist, ye is quite smart. There should have been 2 formations from where you came. The other one will lead you to the wolf soul. The sacred poison sect elders should have already been there. This will be troublesome. However, if I were to catch them unaware, it should be easy to deal with them. I will hurry and return. He clasped his hands in an incantation gesture and disappeared with a flash from the formation. Only the elder devil Bloodflame had remained. After the eccentric disappeared, Wolf's eyes grew dim and an eerie aura emitted from its body. The chains around it began to hum as countless beams of black began to shine through them. With an entirely indifferent manner, the head said, "In the presence of the cultivator, I found it inappropriate to ask about the artifacts you managed to recover." The elder devil bowed and respectfully said, "Sacred ancestor, I've already found 5 that our race left behind in the mortal realm." The wolf head sinisterly said, "That will have to make do. Immediately take them out. Although I can only control half of the magic power in this body, I will be able to break free of the Blackwind Flag's restrictions if I struggle. Even with a divine spirit treasure, it cannot restrain me without a master." Yes, the elder devil hastily waved his arms, summoning a black devilish artifact into each of his hands. A black mirror, a blood-red authority token, a jade lotus, and a grey and jade band. For the 5th, he widely opened his mouth and spat a small bottle. The 5 artifacts immediately spun around his head ceaselessly. The elder devil let out a long whistle and black light wildly shone from his body. The artifacts trembled and rapidly shot into the air. The restrictions immediately sensed this, and bright light brilliantly filled the air with life. Han Li stood at the gates of Kunwu Hall and was looking past it with a curious face. "Great North Essence lights. Who could have thought that they'd appear here?" Han Li muttered. The dense mass of winding silver strings was certainly the same as what he saw in Devilfall Valley. However, these lights weren't connected to any rocks and instead emerged from the dense pillars of the hall. It appeared to hide the interior from sight. Han Li could hear wild and furious laughter from behind. "Brother Han, do you plan on taking the initiative to plunge into the Great North Essence Light, or will you wait and have us greet you with our weapons?" It was the voice of old Devil Qian. Han Li frowned and turned around. He saw that only a dozen trees remained from the columns of gold-weight spirit trees leading up to the gate. Old Devil Qian and the others had nearly caught up. As they were using their treasures to chop down the last of the trees, they watched Han Li with various expressions. The demons had known about the Great North Essence lights from the very start, and the others had immediately recognized what they were from a distance. The atmosphere was a mix of worry and joy. On one hand, Han Li wouldn't be able to progress further. But on the other, it would be an equally impossible task for them as well. Nevertheless, old Devil Qian's intermittent voice was howling with erratically. The Great North Essence Light would prove a dead end to cultivators caught unprepared. It was no wonder the old devil was basking in schadenfreude. Han Li scoffed and turned around, slapping his storage pouch to produce a jet-black ring. It revolved once around him before expanding to 3 meters wide. Talisman characters roamed across the surface. It was none other than one of the Heaven-Earth rings, 1. Previously known as the Yin-Yang rings. Han Li used one to move through Devilfall Valley with Marquis Nanlong. Han Li pointed at the huge ring and willed it forward. At the same time, he quickly struck it with a spell seal and had it cover him in a black barrier. When this happened, old Devil Qian's wild laughter came to an abrupt stop and all the others wore an expression of disbelief. How could he possibly have a method to travel through the Great North Essence Light? As the thought flashed through their minds, they continued to strike at the gold-weight spirit trees with renewed vigor. Then, they witnessed his figure blur as he rushed through the dense bundle of silver light, which twisted around him. Those present all looked at each other with dismay. Faster, we can't have him take the treasure. The silver-winged night fiend was roused with shock and yelled with an ugly grimace. Even if we act faster, what is the point? The light is blocking our way. Ji Qianhao spoke with an ashen complexion. Old Devil Qian scoffed, Great North Essence lights won't block me. The 5 sank devils converged into one huge white figure and suddenly leapt forward without any mind of the remaining trees. Grand Elder, you! Ji Qianhao and the others gasped. Just as the white silhouette entered the range of the trees, a huge pressure suddenly pressed down on it and slowed it in its tracks. Ha! The thundering roar sounded out from the white silhouette, and all of its light faded away before a crimson copy suddenly shot out. It had only fallen to the ground after flying over 30 meters. The crimson silhouette trembled as it walked towards the hall at a leisurely pace. The scene left the others bewildered. The silver-winged night fiend sent a voice transmission to the horned woman. Now that we've arrived, it is time for fellow Daoist Gui to make use of her abilities. Let's take action now. We cannot allow those medallions to fall into their hands. The horned woman nodded and her entire body flashed with white light as she leaped into the air. Then in alternating pulses of black and white, she took the form of a 10-meter-tall tortoise and charged forward. The lion hawk and the silver-winged night fiend simultaneously flew on top of her shell. Then, the tortoise entered the range of the trees. As a result, the two on top were fully suppressed and found themselves incapable of moving. However, light continued to shine from the tortoise and she tenaciously crawled forward as if completely unaffected. Meanwhile, the gold-weight spirit trees began to strangely shine with golden talisman characters. They floated into the air and quickly sank into the bodies of the 3. They attempted to protect themselves with blinding light, but the talisman characters continued to enter their bodies without resistance. It didn't appear to have much of an effect on the tortoise, but the other 2 immediately grew despondent as if put under a restriction. Fortunately, the range of the remaining trees wasn't far and the tortoise was able to escape after a short while. The demons immediately let out a long sigh of relief as their minds were restored to their original state. Chapter 1023, An Ambush. Having escaped the range of the gold-weight spirit trees, the 2 demons climbed off the tortoise's back and she immediately returned to her human form. It appeared that passing through the trees had taken a toll on her as her complexion was now bloodlessly pale. Then, their bodies blurred and they quickly made their way towards the hall. Old Devil Qian's crimson incarnation was one step ahead of them. The 3 saw the mass of silver threads tear the silhouette to shreds as it passed by, but at the same time, blinding crimson light erupted from its body and continuously mended it. As this happened, the silhouette vanished behind the Great North Essence lights. The 3 didn't dare to delay at the sight of this. In a practiced fashion, the lion hawk blurred and appeared in front to widely open its mouth to silently release a golden sound wave. As a result, a small gap from the silver threads began to split. Immediately after, the silver-winged night fiend unfolded his wings and produced an azure wind as well, blowing away the fractured silver threads. With continuous alternation between the 2 abilities, a gap had finally opened and the 3 quickly rushed in before slowly exploring the hall. Still outside, Lin Yinping's expression turned unsightly. So rapidly, their party had been reduced to 5. She gritted her teeth and tensely frowned. She turned her head to Grand Immortal Shu and said, "Brother Shu, As the Grand Immortal continued to chop at a huge tree with a jade sword, he calmly interrupted, "The Saintess need not worry. Our main goal is that Han fellow, not the treasures. With so many people entering, they won't be easy to contest either. Let us rid ourselves of the remaining trees and guard the gate. Ji Qianhao grinned and said, "Aha! Brother Shu's words are reasonable. Even if the others acquire the treasure, they must also leave through here. Although we aren't able to pass through the Great North Essence Lights, they won't be able to get past us once they leave." Lin Yinping glanced at the deceptively lethal silver strings and nodded after a moment of thought. The two black-robed old men also found this plan to be reasonable. Although they worried about the lost opportunity for profit, they continued to chop away at the huge trees. In the blink of an eye, an explosion sounded out and a 30-meter tall tree fell down. Han Li stood in front of Kunwu Hall and breathed out a long sigh. He glanced behind him and saw a dense mass of silver threads. Those ancient cultivators are quite cunning to intentionally place an illusion formation inside the Great North Essence Lights. If it weren't for my bright sight spirit eyes, it would have proved quite troublesome, Han Li muttered. He turned around and found himself in the rear section of Kunwu Hall. It couldn't be considered large, but there were 2 rows of a dozen variously styled wooden chairs that formed an official affairs hall. At the end of these rows, there was a faintly golden chair between them with a 3-meter-tall table standing to its side. The chair was made from common gold-string spirit wood, but the table was made from a single piece of glistening marble. Its entire body was unordinary and filled with spiritual qi. At the moment, a green barrier covered it, but he could faintly see a few items laying on it. These should be the treasures of Kunwu Hall. Han Li raised his brow and looked around to see that the hall was completely empty and void of anything else eye-catching. He then turned around and looked above him. Behind the faint golden chair, an unremarkable painting hung on the wall of 3 men looking at the moon. A Buddhist, a Daoist, and a Confucian stood inside a bamboo forest and were speaking vigorously about something as they gazed at full moon. Because the image was only a foot tall and faded from the test of time, Han Li hadn't taken note of it at first. But now, it caught his eye and he looked at the painting with scrutiny. A long while later, Han Li lowered his head and mulled over his thoughts. He wasn't able to see anything strange from the painting, spiritually or physically. His intuition, however, gave him a distinctly odd feeling. How could such an ordinary item exist in a place like this? As his expression wavered, Han Li suddenly swayed his hand with resolution. A 3-meter-long streak of golden light shot out and rend the painting. In a flicker, the painting was torn to shreds and the pieces fell to the ground. Could it just be my imagination? Han Li puzzlingly thought. But since he had already started, he wasn't about to leave matters unfinished. With a casual wave of his sleeve, several fist-sized fireballs appeared in front of him and he prepared to incinerate the remains of the portrait. "Master, be careful!" Silver Moon cried out. In his alarm, his figure blurred into 8 exact copies of himself before he even realized what was happening. Just then, a stone burst from the ground 3 meters behind him. A spiritual light shined behind the rubble and several blinding streaks of gold and silver struck at Han Li's copies from behind. A crisp clang sounded out as one of them were blocked, revealing a gold-silver shuttle. Han Li tumbled from the strike and blurred 20 meters away. He then turned his head around and was face full of furious alarm. Were it not for the silver tail star shield he had prepared ahead of time, he would have likely been gravely injured. His normally stoic face now held shock and fear with rage burning in his heart. He suddenly flipped his hand and recovered the shining small silver shield into his hand. He flicked his other arm to summon over 30 small golden swords, cleaving at the mound of rubble in front of him. Then, a woman's laugh rang out in a flash of light to reveal a huge gold-silver object. Although so many sword lights moved to attack the object, they all strangely fell to the ground. When he saw this, his heart trembled and a majority of his fury vanished. He immediately looked over. The gold-silver object was actually a 10-meter-tall textile shuttle. Its surface shined like a golden mirror. It was the same shape as what had attacked him earlier, but those shuttles were many times smaller. Fellow Daoist must be quite vigilant for that strike to fail. TCH, could you tell me what techniques you cultivate? The small shuttles that attacked him earlier appeared at the huge one's side. They revolved once around before entering inside. The young woman's voice came from within. Han Li gloomily recalled the flying swords and thoughts quickly flew in his mind. Spiritual light flashed from his entire body and he shot towards the nearby table in an azure streak. Since there were others here, he planned to first grab the treasures and handle the rest later. The longer he was tied down, the more people who would be able to make it past the Great North Essence lights, decreasing his chances of acquiring treasures as well. But just as he took off, he felt that there was something odd and found the woman's voice to be unfamiliar. She definitely wasn't one of the demons or humans he saw up to now. Could it be there were more that entered Kunwu Mountain at an even greater speed than them? The young woman suddenly shouted out in alarm. Han Li was over 60 meters away and had arrived above the table. But then, the air above him suddenly warped and an azure scarf appeared above his head before falling onto him. It was nearly 20 meters wide and appeared right next to him when he least expected it. Even with his vast abilities, he was helpless to act as it covered him. He had become completely trapped. Azure light shined everywhere he looked and he hastily produced the silver tailstar shield as he cursed in his mind. A layer of white mist then surrounded him. A woman strangely appeared on the surface of the azure scarf, the immortal form sect's Lady Mu. Having witnessed the power of Han Li's Triflame fan, she naturally knew that the scarf wouldn't be able to hold him down for long. But with the success of her attack, she didn't dare to delay and shot towards the table. She raised her hand and produced a silver command medallion. Then in a flash, it struck the green light barrier covering the table with mist. Under the shine of the silver light, the seemingly formidable barrier melted away and revealed the true appearance of the treasures that lay there. For crimson wooden tiles, a small purple sword, a palm-sized monk staff, and a scroll brimming with red light, and a dark green block seal with the imprint of a lifelike five-clawed dragon. Lady Mu rejoiced when she saw these items and her gaze dropped onto the seal. After a moment's pause, she took all into her grasp with a wave of her sleeve. Chapter 1024. Seizing Treasure. Just as Lady Mu was about to seize the treasures, the ground below her flashed bright green and several verdant serpents shot out and wrapped around her at lightning speed. With their prey fully restricted, the snakes immediately struck at her with their fangs. Bang! The woman's sentient treasures formed her a barrier of white light, repelling the attack and revealing their true form as green vines, but they still restrained her nevertheless. Lady Mu expressed the same alarmed fury as Han Li had. She hadn't expected that there was someone following her as well. Having trapped Han Li and cleared the barrier for the treasures on the table, wasn't she being taken advantage of? Who could have closely followed behind her sun-moon shuttle and remain completely undetected? The reason why she was able to stealthily burrow underground was because she possessed a silver medallion that the three elders of Kunwu had left behind. It allows her to temporarily control a portion of the restrictions in the hall, giving her access to burrow underground. At that moment, a strange tinkling laugh rang clear and a tall green silhouette silently emerged from the nearby ground. A pair of icy green eyes stared at her, causing her heart to shudder. After clearly seeing the form of the new encounter, she cried out in shock, "A Treant Lord! How can such a monster exist in this world?" Although the green silhouette had a human-like appearance with all the appropriate limbs and head, its body was made of bark skin and more akin to a walking tree. When the Treant Lord heard her cry, it sneered and paid little heed as it blurred towards the table, clearly intending on claiming the treasures for itself. Lady Mu's heart sank. Even if she could escape, it was too late to block the monster. But an unimaginable scene soon followed. Before the Treant drew close to the table, the fragments of the painting Han Li tore up suddenly shined with specks of yellow, white, and red. They formed a tricolor gust that flung the ball of green light over 30 meters back. The ball was dispelled back into its original position and was thrown into an uncontrollable tumble. After several rolls, the tall monster managed to regain control and stood up. It looked at the mists of light with unspeakable terror. The three mists circled around the table and transformed into three indistinct foot-tall silhouettes: the Daoist, the Confucian, and the Buddhist figures from the painting. Their eyes emotionlessly gazed at the tree spirit in the distance as if it was already dead. The three Kunwu elders. The Treant Lord shouted in terror. Without another thought, its body glowed green and it flew head first into the Great North Essence lights, not daring to turn back. Then, the 3 miniature men silently pointed at the small sword, monk staff, and the scroll on the table. The 3 treasures hummed and trembled, jumping into the air and forming 3 streaks of light, immediately disappearing as soon as they appeared. In that next moment, just as the Treant Lord was about to enter the Great North Essence lights, the streaks reappeared and converged together in a single attack. It was too late for the Treant to dodge. A flare of tricolored light ruptured, followed by a deafening explosion. An instant later, the green light drowned it all out as it flared like a sun. When it eventually faded away, all that was left behind was the 3 treasures. The combined strike had entirely vaporized the fearsome Treant Lord. At that same moment, one of the 4 crimsonwood tiles had combusted into ash. The 3 treasures used to exterminate the demon circled once in the air before floating down to their original position on the table. As for the 3 men, they vanished as if they had never existed. These 3 were threads of spiritual sense that the Kunwu masters had left behind in order to prevent the treasures from falling into the hands of any demons or other evil beings. They were the last restriction that existed in Kunwu Hall. The Treant Lord possessed the greatest cultivation of the 4 demons, but it had been destroyed by the treasures in a single strike. It was completely out of luck to have lost its life in such an abrupt manner. Lady Mu rejoiced at this sudden turn of events. With the death of the Treant, the vines clasped around her immediately lost their spiritual nature and burned to nothing in contact with the white ethereal flames. She took a deep breath and recovered her bearings, only to be interrupted by a muffled bang from behind her, followed by a roar of thunder. "Senior Martial Sister, be careful!" The beautiful female cultivator shouted out. Lady Mu felt her heart tremble and she waved her hand without another thought, commanding all the treasures to rise as they shakily floated towards her. In that mere moment, a clap of thunder called out from above and a silhouette appeared with it. He reached out for the treasures, causing them to cease flying in Lady Mu's direction and towards him instead. Having seen his escape from the scarf's imprisonment and his use of lightning movement, Lady Mu released several glacial needles from her mouth in furious alarm, tearing through the air towards Han Li. At the same time, she flung her sleeve, sweeping up the treasures in a red mist. Han Li's expression sank, and he spat out the snow crystal pearl to face the incoming needles. With one hand, he created a large azure hand and grasped at the treasures. With the other, he summoned the Triflame fan. An ominous glint shining from his eye, he waved the fan at Lady Mu without any hesitation. Although he planned on first dealing with the woman who originally ambushed him from within the shuttle, he was resentful at Lady Mu for having trapped him in the scarf and found himself in a crucial moment in the struggle for the treasures. As a result, the silver needles were blocked by the snow crystal pearl, and the hand of light grabbed a hold of her mist. Then, the fan trembled and a tricolored inferno burst forth in the face of Lady Mu. Having previously witnessed the fan's fearsome might, she knew it wasn't something she could withstand. Helpless, she could only quickly fly backward. When the Triflame fan's strike missed, the attack ruptured and filled the air with a halo of tricolored light and immense spiritual pressure. Even Han Li couldn't help but take several steps back. The large azure hand and Lady Mu's red mist had been on the edge of the attack scope and completely disappeared. With all of the treasures falling out from the red mist's grip, he felt elated. However, it was then that 3 opposing lights emerged from the Great North Essence lights at the front of the hall: a crimson silhouette, a silver streak, and a ball of purple mist. All of these figures immediately fade from sight as soon as they disappeared, in a display of clear skill. Han Li inwardly cursed, but he was quick to react. Rolls of thunder sounded out as he arrived above the treasures. He was only the first one there, and the other 3 each appeared nearby in quick succession and simultaneously attacked him as they attempted to seize the treasure for themselves. Unable to deal with any of the others, he quickly swept up the 2 treasures closest to him with azure mist, a wooden tile and a sparkling red scroll. When he attempted to take the next closest item, the monk staff, over 10 beams of crimson light attacked him from above along with a series of golden sound waves. With no better option, Han Li could only retreat and evade the attacks for the time being. As a result, the crimson silhouette had seized the monk staff itself. The purple mist and silver streak cared little for anything other than the 2 wooden tiles that dropped nearby for fear that they would be seized by someone else. When he saw this, he paused in surprise. Then, the crimson silhouette reached out to grab the green seal. "Stop," The dragon call crest isn't yours." A woman's voice hastily shouted. A white jade ruler suddenly floated above the crimson silhouette and smashed without mercy. Before the ruler even landed, it released what sounded like a Buddhist chant and summoned countless white loti into the surrounding air, each of them the size of a bowl. They all radiated with 7-colored Buddhist light, covering not only the silhouette, but the silver streak and purple mist as well. Just as it so happened, Han Li's previous retreat had put him out of range of the ruler's attack. Dumbstruck, Han Li heard the woman shout and the lotus simultaneously rupture, converging together, each to form the petal of a giant lotus. Countless Buddhist scripts flowed out from every petal and the chanting began to resound throughout the hall like an army. Trapped inside the flower, the three figures weren't able to pick up any of the treasures and all began to sway as if they had become drunk. Chapter 1025. The Might of the Yang Ring. Just as an overwhelming sight bloomed in front of Han Li, the Vajra barrier within his body suddenly began to pulse in size. In his alarm, he hastily concentrated his magic power to the barrier and suppressed it. He then took a deep glance at the lotuses in the distance before beating his wings and disappearing from sight. In the next moment, he reappeared at the edge of the great north essence light and flew in as an azure streak. In his eyes, stealthily running away was the wiser action with the sudden appearance of this immensely powerful jade ruler, whose might was no lesser than the Triflame fan, even if its abilities were inclined to illusions and restriction. It was most likely a divine spirit treasure replica of some kind, and since he already managed to acquire 2 treasures, why should he put himself at greater risk? Although he felt vengeful towards the ruler's master for her initial ambush, now was not the time to settle debts. After all, Old Devil Qian and the Night Fiend wouldn't prove easy opponents. No matter his confidence in his powers, his life would be at risk if he were attacked by them all at once. The beautiful woman stowed inside the huge gold-silver shuttle clasped her hands in an incantation gesture and controlled the white jade ruler with a strained expression. Although she saw that Han Li had withdrawn, she was too busy to pay him any heed. After all, he hadn't taken away the vital dragon call crest. Lady Mu saw her junior martial sister trap Old Devil Qian and the others in the huge rainbow lotus. After hatefully glancing in the direction Han Li had escaped, she entered the illusion. Due to her junior's control, she was free from any influence of its power, and easily grabbed a hold of the dragon call crest. But when she reached out for the small purple sword next to it, the Buddhist light flashed and a portion of the lotus above her began to collapse. Old Devil Qian and the 2 demons were able to escape the restriction and reappeared to glare at Lady Mu with an ominous gaze. The magic power of her junior martial sister had been exhausted and the 4 skies ruler lost effect. The woman paled. Not long after Han Li charged back through the great north essence light, he ran into the horned woman, the human form of the vast cliff tortoise. She was clad in a strange green armor that seemed to completely repel the silver strings. But strangely enough, the horned woman walked slowly as if she were incapable of any movement techniques. It was no wonder the other 2 had left her behind and arrived in the hall first. When Han Li appeared before the demon, the horned woman glanced at him and paused in surprise. Then with a wary expression, she held a pitch-black rod in front of her and began to prudently observe him. Maintaining a calm expression, Han Li promptly flew to the side and walked around her. There was no grudge between them to the best of his knowledge. And while they were restricted in such a dangerous area, there was no reason for them to take action. But he had been mistaken. As soon as he swept past her, her expression stirred and she rigidly turned to watch Han Li with terror. This had greatly alarmed him and he unconsciously came to a stop, bafflingly staring back in turn. "Hand over the items you took from the hall," the woman shrieked. Then, she pointed the black rod at Han Li and had it extend 10 meters long. It blurred, producing countless copies itself to form a small mountain above him. The mountain's sudden appearance caused Han Li's heart to tremble, and the woman's crazed expression and words had left him baffled, but he didn't reveal any fear in the slightest. He simply raised his hand and released a black ring to the rods above him. When the woman saw this, she rejoiced. The rod in her hand was something she had refined from the materials around her while she was trapped. Along with continuous tempering for tens of thousands of years, she created a grand treasure. Although the mound of rods appeared unremarkable, each one weighed nearly a ton. She was completely confident this would be enough to crush Han Li. With that thought, killing intent flashed through her mind, and she roused all the might in her body to pour copious amounts of spiritual power into the rods, causing them to swell. It wasn't difficult for him to immediately guess what she was doing. Although he didn't know why she was trying to kill him, this inspired him to do the same. He then expressionlessly pointed to the black rods above him. As soon as the ring touched the mass of rods, it released a hum, causing all the nearby silver strings to hum in chorus. They immediately trembled and densely weaved together around the rods with incredible speed. In the blink of an eye, they had completely disappeared from sight. You can control the Great North Essence lights. The horned woman shrieked with complete disbelief. The heaven-earth rings were a set of two, one yin to protect against the essence lights and one yang to control them. Han Li snorted in contempt. If they were outside the lights, he would be greatly fearful of a late nascent soul stage demon, as he would hardly be capable of killing her. Their current circumstances, however, was a different story. Since she took the initiative to court death, he decided to spare no effort in fulfilling her wish. Although he couldn't make out what creature she was, her body and soul should prove to be incredibly rare top-grade materials. With that in mind, Han Li tossed aside any intentions of a peaceful resolution and struck the ring above him with a spell seal. It circled in the air and lit up with a hum. It radiated a mysterious dark light and took control of the silver strings 100 meters around it. Then, with a mere mental command, they immediately lined up together to form a huge silver wave and rippled in the horned woman's direction. The woman screamed out in alarm and didn't dare to further tangle with Han Li. She hastily spat out a ball of black-red blood essence and held her hands in an incantation gesture, commanding it to form a mist around her armor and turning to blood red. At that moment, the silver wave collapsed on top of her and completely engulfed her like driftwood before the tide. Green and red light flared from her armor, followed by the deafening clangs of metal. Although she had used a secret technique, the armor could barely resist the Great North Essence light to begin with. Now that there was a great quantity that attacked in full force, her armor was littered with holes in the blink of an eye. The woman screamed with twisted pain on her face, and she pressed her hands on the armor, producing multiple layers of gray light to condense into a stone-like material as an additional layer of defense, and slowing the erosion of her armor from the assault of silver strings. The stone just as quickly turned to rubble underneath the assault, forcing the woman to use her true essence to continuously replenish it. At a glance, it was only a matter of time before it was completely destroyed. However, Han Li was fully intent on killing the demon and promptly struck the yang ring in his hand with several spell seals. The ring revolved once in the air and pulled in the Great North Essence light from a distance to form another wave with overwhelming momentum. Her face turned as pale as the gray light shining around her armor upon seeing the incoming attack. There was no time for her to react. It struck and her armor was completely shattered. It would only take a moment before it collapsed in its entirety. With complete fright, her eyes frantically darted around her and she shouted, "Stop, fellow Daoist! Please spare my life. I am willing to recognize you as my master and become your spirit beast." The light had penetrated a portion of her armor and mashed her arm to a pulp. Given the many years she's lived, how could she be willing to die in a place like this? Become my spirit beast. Han Li's expression stirred and he temporarily paused his attack. Staring at the woman trapped underneath the silver tide, he calmly said, "Do you believe me to be a child? Soul restraint techniques have no effect on demons of your caliber. How could you possibly become my spirit beast?" If the woman didn't quickly reply, he would immediately kill her without any hesitation. He wasn't about to let her buy time for anything to save her. Seeing that his killing intent had yet to fade away, she fearfully said, "There is no need for me to explain in detail. You acquired a wooden tile from Kunwu Hall, my soul-binding tile. Until I finish cultivating the great Tao, I will be restricted by it.